Hello and welcome to the BNB show. My name is Brandon. This guy over here is Brendan. That's Seahawks, Brendan Nelson to you, if you were. It's good to have you back in the house here today after a kind of I'm going to call it somewhat action-packed day. We didn't get a lot of our talks doing stuff, but everybody was very keenly eyed onto what was going down. How are you doing, Brendan?
Doing good. I'm doing pretty good. Things are shaping up some at least similarly to how we expected, and we're just about ready to get underway here, so I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's if you can come away from a loss, obviously in preseason, we're not going to get caught up with wins and losses. You are and I are of like in this way. We're looking for really how do you get to whatever that result may be because you are playing back up so much of the preseason. But even in a loss like this, Lambeau on the road, 10 a.m. game, most, your guys going against they were kind of one ahead of you on the depth chart with everybody they were playing against you. This was a good little preseason game for us, and we're going to top in this just to start out, folks. Going to put a button here on preseason a little bit, and then we'll dive on into some of what's going down with the Cutdown day to day because you got 1,000 people on the market. I know a lot of you are wondering who the Hawks should be looking at, who's the number one guys on the list right now. Me and Brendan will definitely have some possibilities for you here down through this show today. So strap in, guys. It's going to be we're going to cover a lot of ground here on this one. But Brendan, did you feel similarly as well that you come out of this preseason game and it's one that, okay, you get the loss, but just barely lose at the end. Team really shows some strength all the way down through the roster again.
Yeah, I think that we as football fans all have a pretty good understanding that winning and losing games in the preseason doesn't really matter. I think we all have a pretty good grasp of that. So the things that we need to see, we saw. You want to see your team look good for a period of time, even if it's just like a quarter. You want to see your team look good for a quarter. You want to see your team look good for a half. You want your team to show they can be good. And then you just hope that's the part of the team that manifests when the games actually start. And in a game like this, where you're playing very few potential starters or potential contributors, you know how it's going to be, especially because Green Bay, I said this a couple times last week, was trying to make up for lost time because they lost the second half of their New England preseason game.
Yeah. And you could feel it. You were trotting out your guys as you typically would with a third string game, and they're coming out with their first stringers, both sides of the ball, not just Jordan Love getting the run, but you seeing their number one defensive line out
Kenny
there
Clark.
and going, yeah, you're going, oh, okay. The linebacker from Georgia they drafted was out there. It was going to prove to be a tough battle. The fact you kept this as close as you did is actually kind of, frankly, to me, as much as being encouraged by anything else, that you could hold so strong with that team on the road, being that you were kind of outmanned with that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you one quick question. One question I think we got to wonder about as we came in this preseason and from this game, I think would be kind of a microcosm of going one way or the other with it. I felt a lot better about the ability to stop the run, which I think Brendan is as high as people are on the offense and the offense and being productive. I think they're also a little bit reticent when it comes to the defensive line and being able to hold up against the run. Is this going to be something that sinks this team as much as the offense will take us to the heights? And it felt like to me through all three of these preseason games, the team was pretty good in stopping the run overall. It wasn't perfect, but it was certainly improved over last year. I think they had 164 yards in the rushing attack throughout the course of this game, but I myself don't find myself concerned with that. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's so hard to judge when you look at who's out there. Even if it's good, you don't know if that really means anything. But overall, throughout this whole preseason, I feel like the run defense has been fine. And I believe that in the modern NFL, it's really hard for a run defense to derail a season. It has to be really bad. It has to be one of the worst in the league, like bottom 3, bottom 4. So you can have a below average run defense or an average run defense. I think that's okay. I've seen teams that are not really good at stopping the run win anyway because they make it not matter by being good at everything else. Those other things that you can be good at in the NFL these days are just more important. So I think the run defense that we saw in the preseason is good enough. And remember, we didn't get to see any Bobby Wagner. We didn't get to see any Jamal Adams. We didn't get to see any, not that he really affects the run defense, but Quandre Diggs. So, yeah, I'm feeling good. Yeah, Witherspoon also, you got to throw him in there as well. No Woolen, not that he has a big effect on the run defense, but it rolls downhill, right? If he's in the game, the corners are able to play more aggressively without help, allowing other, you guys get what I'm saying there.
Safety doesn't have to be in cover 2 looks as much. You can go to the single high and know you're fine.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm feeling fine about this run defense right now, personally. I'm gonna have to see it in a real game. Maybe I'll feel differently in a couple weeks, but right now I think it's fine.
It definitely, like to your point, you didn't have the front line guys in, and it did take them 45 attempts, Brendan, to get up to that yards in this game. So you come out the other end of it. My feeling was, if I come out the other end of a game as a defense and I've held them to 3.6 yards per carry, and their number one rusher by average yards per attempt is a quarterback, I'm going to feel pretty good about what I did as far as stopping the run in that game. And this was consistent through all three of these aspects of things. All three of these preseason games. Offensively, we got to see a little bit more of a run of Drew Lock in this game. Which was good to see. He needed some time out there, Brendan. Would have loved to have even seen him in the 2-minute drive. I know you want to give Holton another splash in there, but I got to feel like maybe Drew could have brought you back. You would have gotten a little bit of a feel for his ability kind of in crunch time there to get a feel for him. That's hard to kind of get those opportunities. What was
Yeah.
your stance on his performance?
I thought he played fine. I'm not going to go over the top with it. He did throw a ball that should have been a pick six all day. Absolutely 100% should have gone the other way for six. But overall, I think the thing to really come away with from this preseason is how good a job he's doing getting the ball out quickly. He's getting pressured routinely, because especially early in that game, and I'm not saying the offense was playing well, it wasn't, but he was getting pressured very quickly because they had their starters in against our backup offensive line, and he was finding ways to get the ball out. He was finding ways to at least give his guys a chance, and I was impressed by that. There were a couple plays where he was so in a rush to get the ball out, he didn't notice that he had a big play developing. Like, I think there was one play where Cade Johnson had a long touchdown, but Drew never even had a chance to look that way because he was already in check down mode on, I think it was a third down, and we ended up punting. So you don't love to see that, but that's probably better than actually throwing interceptions. So I'd say he played fine. I'm not going to say he played great or anything, but I feel better about Drew Lock being the backup quarterback now than I did before the preseason started. I would put it like that.
I think that's a fair way of putting it. And I agree with you. Don't think you can go over the top on this or even go up into the range of being, oh man, is this a guy that should maybe push with Gino? Gino's your starter here. And he had the play, to your point on that as well, on the interception throw, watching the all 22 last night. There was a crosser coming across the other side of the field there on that play that was wide open from the moment it hit the hash to where it was, ending up. And he just never looked at it. He got laser locked in there. And that's what sometimes happens is he gets deciding something pre-snap and what he's going to do, and doesn't react as much in the moment to then changing as he needs to change, which is just, he's got a lot of good he brings. And he showed you that too on the other side of it through this preseason, including throwing a really nice ball, Brendan. I mean, he can be at times pinpoint while putting a little bit of velocity on it, which is hard to do for quarterbacks, those layered kind of throws in there. And he does them almost effortlessly at times, which is very, very impressive. It was uphill battle, as we talked about, on both lines of scrimmage, because you got the starters against your twos, the twos trying to hold on for dear life. I don't know if we could take a lot from that, like you said, on either side of the ball because of that. But, maybe let's look a little bit more deeper into the individual performances here on both of these lines of scrimmage. Olu looked okay to me, going back and revisiting him. There was some good, some bad, but it was more rookie flashes, and you do go firmly to Evan Brown being your starter now, do you not, on the heels of this, where he's at in preseason, just in that battle?
Oh yeah, there's not much of a decision to make there, and I think it has as much to do with the fact that Oluwatimi just didn't get really a chance to play as anything else. Hard to miss a couple weeks of training camp and practice and a preseason game and end up winning the job. I don't think Olu looked that good against Green Bay, but it is his first game back from an injury, so that's not even really an indictment of him on my part. But I think that he's making his way forward. He's making his way forward, and I got no problem with Evan Brown starting. I think he deserves to start based off how he played last time he was playing center. And again, he's going up against a lot of Packer starters, guys like Kenny Clark, a really, really good player that's getting thrown in the deep end here. And I don't think he played terribly. He just looked like he didn't know where he was supposed to be on a couple plays where he was trying to play in space, which is obviously a big part of making this work with him, because he's a guy who didn't test well, but somehow still manages to play well in space. But again, first game back from an injury. I don't think we need to make a big deal out of it.
No, I agree with your full assessment on it. And let's see where this is as the season goes along and he gets more of a chance to, go through the year and play a little bit more, maybe get more comfortable in there, and maybe really truly at that point push Evan Brown. As you said, it's hard when you miss training camp. I think it's probably especially hard when you're a rookie missing that time. I mean, that's where it becomes vital for you to be in there and having those reps so that you can keep yourself rounded out. And he was pushing Evan as a starter reps at the start of camp before the injury went down.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't really much of anything else to talk about, I don't think, on that offensive line. I've talked enough about Stone Forsythe and Jake Curhan to where I think we know they kind of are, what they are.
Forsythe I didn't notice him in any viscerally gross way in this game.
He didn't give up anything major, but he's a hang on kind of guy there. If you're having him in, you're just holding on for dear life a little bit. Bradford was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, he's fun.
Did you see the PFF progression of his grade from week 1 to week 3? It's way up there. No, his PFF grade was great in this game. It's like the reverse M. Night Shyamalan Rotten Tomatoes chart. It's like that, but the exact opposite.
He's getting ready to make his 6th sense. He just did his signs. Now he's getting ready to do his 6th sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, good for him. Good for him. We may need him at some point this year. Phil Haynes is not the most durable guy. He might just have to go out there and play.
He might. I'll tell you too, Damian Lewis is a good little mauler in there for us as a guard, but I'll tell you what, this guy just clobbers people in there. It's not technically sound. It's not how a coach would draw it up to be done all the time. And he does have some of those. That's where the failure grades come in, but there's no denying that guy's got kind of a little bit of a different layer of power that he brings to the table for his upside into the future. Is there, Brendan? I mean, he had a couple of just pancakes he's got that nasty, like kind of that angry play with the chip kind of mentality too from the interior lineman position. Now, I'm not just going to do my job. I'm going to finish you to the whistle.
Yeah, there's definitely something good there. There's definitely, there's one guy in my Discord called him like the Anthony Richardson of right guards, which I know sounds really weird, but in this idea of like he's really, really not ready to play football now, but there's a lot of exciting potential there.
I love that thought process because there's a built-in patience there. And with these kind of players, these are the ones that you have a little more patience for. If you have the guy that's 24 coming out, an older prospect, you're expecting them to be a further down the line in that development. So I think that's a smart outlook on this for a guy that's had 14 starts, 14 starts, something like that. Not many at the college level. And so certainly could buy some time of having a year to kind of figure it out. But he's got the things you can't teach, man. Long arms, strong as hell, and he moves better than your normal guards do at that position, especially right guard.
Yeah.
We got a dono here from Deraje Desta. Thank you for the $5 donation. I do appreciate it, Mr. Desta. Says, happy to hear that Jackson Smith-Njigba was already catching passes at the start of Tuesday's practice. That wasn't good news on the day, wasn't it, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, Pete initially said 10 days, and that sounded way too optimistic. I didn't buy it at all. But basically, I mean, 10 days after the procedure, here he is. Now, I think he's got a cast on his arm still, so I'm not saying he could go out there in a game, but he's got a real chance to play by week 1, it looks like. And I feel better about his ability to play in week 1 now than I did before, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, he's out there doing that today. It's making you think, well, we'll probably should let him sit a week, but he seems like he's pushing it. That's also what I take from this is Jackson's like, let's go. I want to get in there. I want to get rolling. And I think Carroll does end up leaning into saying, look, we can get this handled with the Rams without you. Take the extra week. Let's get you fully. Just one more week will help here. It couldn't hurt on this kind of thing. But we get him back for the Lions game. That's the important one to me as much as any. Is like we got to the Lions game could be factoring in huge, even though it's week 2. It could factor in huge down the line as far as the tiebreakers and stuff if that goes down to it. So we got to handle business, and it's on Detroit, and it's 10 a.m. So we need him back for that game, Desta. But thank you, man, for the $5 donation. And yeah, he looked good, man. He was out there catching passes confidently with the cast on his arm. Didn't look inhibited. He wasn't out there like doing like one-handed catches. Guys will go on sub practice, Brendan. He was sticking and somebody was firing in some passes. Like if I'm the quarterback, they're like, hey, just puff it in there. What are you doing? Well, coach, yeah. I know you got a hose, Drew. Soften it up.
Yeah, I did notice that, but I mean, he looked like he could handle it. And, if there's an area we can trust this team in, I think it's the area of not forcing an unhealthy player out there in a meaningless situation and putting a player who is obviously injured in a way that is crippling out on a football field. I mean, I guess we kind of did that in Super Bowl 49 with Cam, who had tore his Achilles or whatever, but was still playing. What was it? What was it he had? On the last day of practice, the last play of practice before the Super
MCL.
Bowl. Yeah, the MCL. Like, that's different. I'm sure he was like, if you want to keep me out of this game, you better be ready to throw me in prison. But outside of situations like that, I don't think this is the kind of team that would just ignore big blaring warning signs that a guy should not be on the field and shove him out there.
Yeah. I agree that their track record doesn't speak to that. It speaks to being more protective with players than trying to just do it. And we'll see how they play it with this one. Jackson's probably chomping at the bit here, but I'm sure Coach Carroll will override him if he needs to. Whatever, just to get the Lions game, though, that's the important part back, because that's one that is going to be one of our tougher. I think it's going to be one of our tougher games on the schedule, but it will have some big ramifications potentially down the road in a win or a loss on that one.
Right.
You don't normally get in week 2, but Desta, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Chase Stern coming in with a big $20 donation. Chase, thank you very, very, very much. That huge dono, brother. You were very kind for that. Says, do you think the whole Jonathan Taylor thing affects the Seahawks at all?
I mean, there's a little bit of trickle down, I guess, because it's less likely the Colts blow it up now, so less likely they move DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart and their offensive line guys, but I mean, that's about it, right? We were never trading for Jonathan Stewart, and we shouldn't have. So,
yeah, I think it's that on the head of this. Brendan's reasoning on that is the first thing that affects the Seahawks here, because you were looking at them to blow it up and get real with it, and they're obviously not. They're going to maybe hope. I've also thought maybe they could be doing something on this where, Brendan, they're just going, let's just play it by ear. Like, if we're only getting a 3rd round pick back for Jonathan Taylor, what's the difference between just putting Jonathan on ice for 4 weeks and then coming back around the trade deadline and seeing if there's not an improved offer from a contending team that's lost their number 1 tailback? I wonder if that's maybe what they're doing here. And then they're placating Jonathan by saying, look, you're still getting paid. We're protecting you. You're not getting more injured now. You're not going to play a full season of games. And so it's like kind of gives him a compromise point and buys them time. So maybe that's a move down the road, Brendan, that erases, but they want to just, like, the owner's like, let's just try the first 4 weeks. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see. Let's just see. You never know. Maybe he's Lamar. Maybe he's Lamar. So we'll revisit at that point. The one other point I'll say is that at least Jonathan didn't go to a team like the Eagles. I know he wouldn't have gone to the Niners, but like, they were definitely in on trying to maybe potentially trade for Taylor, and that would have made them a little bit more dangerous. So, good thing.
I kind of feel like that's how this ends. I kind of feel like
he
does
they
go
still
to the
get
Eagles.
him. They still do.
I mean, the Eagles cut Trey Sermon today, right?
They did. It's
Yeah.
very true.
And we know apparently Rashad Penny doesn't look right. So at that point, they actually kind of have a need. So I kind of feel like that's how this ends. But I don't know. I mean, anything can happen when Jim Irsay's involved. So maybe he just sits on the bench the whole season.
Yeah, it could be that he's just like, no, to hell with him. He's not going to force my hand. Some of these owners, it becomes a battle of egos, and it's the principle stuff rather than the thing that remains on this to me, Brennan, is this. We think this guy's not a value. This position is not valuable. Therefore, we don't want to pay him, even though he's earned a contract. Okay, let's find a point of consistency then. Now we're going to be willing to trade him and accommodate his request since we do not value him. You get the trade requests. We want a 1st-round pick. Nobody's offering you a 1st-round pick. Well, we want a 1st-round pick or we're not trading him. Okay, so which is it? The running back position matters because Christian McCaffrey went last year for a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. He didn't go for a 1. Maybe that you can go, well, buy the Jimmy Johnson. If you want to be an a-hole, you can go, would you buy the Jimmy Johnson chart? That's technically a 1st-round. Yeah, I shot. He didn't go for a 1st-round pick. And Jonathan Taylor is likewise not going to go for 1 either, because that's the value of the running back position, something the Colts have already acknowledged here. But Brendan, they're being a little weird with this. They're trying to have it both ways. They're cake and eat it too. We don't, but we do. Yes, but no. Have the stones to sit by your principles if you're the general manager. You don't want to pay the guy? Fine. Then sit by your principles and move him. I think this is where the running backs have a little bit of an argument to be made at times about, we're kind of getting done a little dirty here on this stuff. It's not full on collusion, Brendan, but it's a little dirty.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem with it too, the thing you're talking about, is he requested a trade, and it's, very clearly that the ball is in, you have the advantage if you're approaching the Colts because he's already made it clear he doesn't want to be there anymore. I don't think that was the case with McCaffrey, right? They just traded McCaffrey because it was time to trade McCaffrey.
That's right. Exactly. And once a guy does indicate that, you're not getting maximum value back from him. If in any case, if they've gotten to the point of, It's one of the incredible things about getting the Wilson deal done is that you have a pretty much open announcement of a trade a year ahead of time, and they were still able to get the returns they were. If a player signals, I don't want to play anymore, and I might not ever play another down for this team again, or if I do, I ain't giving full effort, well, your value goes down there, because why should somebody give you the maximum value at that point? They know you're going to eventually give them away.
Yeah, unless you're the Cincinnati Bengals trading Carson Palmer for some reason, the Raiders give you 2 first-round picks and then use him for 8 games.
Well, two dysfunctional organizations having that happen, it's like incestuousness, and what comes out of it. You're not who can predict at that point what is going to be the fruits of that,
Yeah. Real quick here, it doesn't show up on StreamYard, but Eric Tams just gifted 5 memberships on my side. So thank you, Eric Tams.
Let's go.
And congratulations to Asum Panda, Uber XMC, Joshua Uu, Mike Smith, and TJ Singh.
Let's go. Hell yeah. That's good stuff right there. Nicely. Thank you very much for that. Very kind of you on that end of it. Who was that? Let's give him a shout out.
Eric Tams.
Eric Tams, you the mans. Thank you, Chase, for the $20 donation again as well on my side of this. We'll keep rolling on through here. John, thank you for a $5. Says, how do you hope you feel? I think you mean, how do you feel? Hope you feel about their 2-man. Yeah, you're not gonna get me and Brennan happy about this one. How's you liking those 2-man fronts, Brennan? Huh? You liking that? Huh? You digging that stuff?
Can, in pure passing situations, you can do it, but that should be about it, right? Like, if you know the other team has to pass, if it's 3rd and 13 or 2nd and 22, then sure, makes some sense. But other than that, it just gets you in trouble.
Well, the question I'd ask you as a follow-up to you is, are they running it that way? Are they running?
Not right now. Hopefully they end up running it that way.
Yeah, me and Brendan share the same thoughts on this one, John. I'm a preference to if you're going to be a 3-4 defense, be a 3-4 defense. Seahawks are not the only one running this hybridized 2-man front. I don't want to overstate it. Like, you don't see this in other places too. But it doesn't mean I have to like it. And it doesn't mean that I can't still feel like coaches are just overthinking themselves here. Like, they're thinking they're being so creative and then we move this guy here and then we move that guy there. It's one of those things where you're like 15 steps down the line in your point of brilliance, but you never started up at the one point of the initial spot where you're taking this defensive lineman and moving him way inside and this outside linebacker and putting him into a wide 9 technique. And there's this massive natural space that is now created every snap, just naturally there, that you have to overcome. And there are, like you say, maybe some benefits from a blitz angle or bringing guys from different angles, doing different creative things. But the problem remains in those kind of fronts. And I don't think I've yet seen really a defense consistently rocking those 2-man fronts that are going out there and stopping the run and getting it done on the back of it. So I'm not a fan, John. I'm actually pretty perturbed by it that they're still running it so much, but it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. Drew's vision just doesn't seem good. Drew's vision just doesn't seem good still, says John. And then odds of possibly picking up Clark. I think Brendan was kind of intimating this a little bit with your evaluation of feeling good about it, but not great about the performance. Is that fair?
Yeah, overall, I think it was good. He's still one of the better backup quarterbacks in this league at this point. But, I mean, at the same time, there aren't really enough quarterbacks to go around, as is. So the fact that Drew Lock is not a top 32 quarterback in the league, which I think he probably isn't. I'm thinking about it off the top of my head. You could probably find 32 better quarterbacks than Drew Lock right now. Then he's supposed to be a backup, and that's what he is. So you're not going to get perfect stuff out of him, but you are getting a guy who is actually a little better at using his legs than I thought, a guy who is getting the ball out of his hands quickly at the least, and does have a big arm. There are upsides that you have to embrace.
Yeah, and I think it's his he's predetermined a little bit in his nature of what he wants to do. He wants to be very smart pre-snap and then have everything kind of play out that way post-snap. And that's not the NFL world. And you're going to get tricked and fooled. And then you got to react on your feet a little bit properly. When he is right and when he is wrong and he makes the correct read to go to it, I mean, he's got a great arm and he's very accurate. So there's a lot he brings. Brendan mentioned the mobility. There's a lot he brings to the table. And this is a guy who is capable of having a Geno Smith ascent. There's a keen difference between Geno Smith and Drew Lock, and that's that Drew Lock is 2 years removed from getting his starting opportunity in Denver. Geno Smith was 10 years removed of getting his starting opportunity with the New York Jets. So it's not apples for apples to expect Drew to be at Geno's level at this point. We got to maybe give him time to see if he can develop in that way. Quarterbacks do develop. he does look like he's stepping forward. He's playing better this year in the preseason overall than he played last year. Absent that one throw that Brendan mentioned, he was good across the board. There was not one more interceptable worthy pass or almost a fumble. He was very clean through the rest of his game. So I'm encouraged by what I see, and I feel fine with him coming off the bench. If we need him for 5 games, I'm not going to say the season's over with.
Right.
I'm not going to say, well, it's done. I'm going to say, well, he can still stay in this. He can get you 3-2 through these games. Last spot, odds of possibly picking up Jared Clark. That was a very, very highly. I thought Danny Shelton, with all the Husky love in my chat today, Brendan, was going to be the one that everyone was speaking about, but it turned out it was instead Jared Clark, Coastal Carolina.
We're going to need to do something because right now we got 6 defensive linemen on the roster, and I think 2 of them are going to go on short-term IR.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what exactly the plan is there too, John, with defensive linemen. I'm still remaining in that spot if we need some more help here. Cameron Young didn't play 1 snap, but right now he's due to be your backup game 1 to Jaron Reed as it currently stands, unless you're planning on rocking some of these other guys on Draymond Jones as a nose tackle or something. I don't know at this point if they've got something in mind. It's odd to me a bit, to be honest with you. Jared Clark was fun. Me and Brendan took a close look at him. Former, I think, tight end, gained like 75 pounds in his time in college.
Fan. I loved him.
Yeah, he was fun. He's very raw. He's not your just quintessential take on 2 defenders and hold the point of attack and root down, and you're going to get a quintessential nose tackle type there. He's got the size to do it and eventually get in that point, but he was more of a man on fire a little bit in college and just trying to penetrate and get in the backfield and cause a ruckus. But he's really big, really long. He's got an interesting skill set, but probably raw is one of the reasons why I'd say he probably was cut today.
Yeah. I would not be against taking a flyer on that. I guess the issue is that if he is raw and we need somebody right now, that's not such a great mix.
That's where I have a little bit of reticence to think that this is going to happen with Jared Clark, Brendan, is because if he was more refined, what they're needing right now is more certainty here, right? They've got the Cameron Young. He's raw. We don't know what we're going to get, but we like the upside on him guy on the roster for the nose tackle position. You need the true backup to Jaron Reed that can actually rotate in on those snaps and be strong as a run defender. And this has been my thing with some of the names I've seen released. I know we're in the Packers right now. We'll be dipping into more of this kind of at the end of this, but the thing I've seen of the names that have been initially released here of the guys cut today, defensive line wise, who could help out as a nose tackle, I've not been very overwhelmed by the names. Clark would be a guy I'd be open to, John. I like him, and I did like his tape too, but just how raw he is, he's not ready. He's not. What we need right now is a guy ready to get on the field, be a run stuffer. No pass rush, fine. Don't need any of that. Give me 0 of that. Zero. Give me a negative of that. Just be a run stuffer. But we need that. And that's what Jared is, as raw and talented as he is, does not yet provide that certainty. So even Danny Shelton, he's bounced around so much. Nobody seems to really want him for past the bare minimum amount of time they have to keep him wherever he does go. Are you a Danny Shelton guy? You know more probably about him than I do, being that you've been tracking the Huskies for years with it.
Well, at this point, beggars can't really be choosers, can they? So the problem is if you bring him in, you have to guarantee him his whole salary for the year, even if you cut him after like 3 games. So remember in 2018, we had a defensive tackle. I think his name might have been Sullivan, who we signed in the offseason. He started week 1 and then we cut him, but we had to pay him the whole year. And that was a very weird thing. We had him for 1 game. He played a little bit and then we cut him. And I think he went to the Vikings and played the whole season for them, but we still had to pay him for the whole year.
He played pretty good for the Vikings that year too, didn't he?
I think so. Yeah. So when you're talking about signing a veteran, you have to guarantee them the whole year's salary if you're going to have them by week 1. That's the way it works, I think.
So we come back to my bottom line on this, Brendan, is I think they want to make a grander swing here than that. Than a Danny Shelton, they take a risk on for a full year's of salary. He's on the roster after week 1. They can come back around to a Shelton type to me after week 1, because if they are on the roster after week 1, it's not guaranteed. So even if it's a veteran now, if it's in week 2 that you sign him, as long as they're not on the roster after week 1, like that guy was, you can technically have a guy that you get. And if something happens, you got to release him. You can release him for something else, like if he got injured, for instance, or whatever. So that does open up to that. But I still say with this, Brendan, I know this is kind of no, I don't want it was more of a, for the back end of the shows, we're talking about the stuff, but I still feel like my gut instinct on this is I'd love to know where you are with it. John's looking to go a little bit bigger than this. I'm not saying it's big time first round pick swing here. Okay. But a guy that is going to bring more than this when he does make that move, be it now or just before the trade deadline.
I feel like that's where we're headed. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that we're going to need to do something like that, especially if we start the season well. And it feels like, okay, we're good, but how do we get to great?
Yeah.
I maintain I'm against taking a big swing like the Chris Jones thing. I am actually personally against that because mainly because to me, even if we added Chris Jones, I don't think we're better than the Eagles. And if we're going to make a blockbuster trade like that, I want to come out of it feeling like, okay, we're going to the Super Bowl. And I wouldn't feel that way. But if you want to take a smaller swing, Buckner, Grover Stewart, the Dolphins guy who they weren't able to come to an agreement with, Wilkins, I think, Christian Wilkins.
Yeah.
Apparently not on the trade market, but they say that until he is. So I feel like that's probably the way that this goes.
Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay if they wait on this where they're looking at these releases today. There isn't a guy, Hankins, for instance, with the Dallas Cowboys. I was thinking maybe, he'll be one of those back end guys they could cut. But there wasn't any guys to me that really jumped out. And Lawrence with Cardinals, you go look at him. He's just another guy. All these guys are kind of Jags down the line. And I think we got to have a little bit more than that, especially for just the run defense. We need the Grover Stewart guy with that run defense that guy could bring in via a trade or an equivalent. So we might have to wait on this one. Might have to hold our butt cheeks on this one for a little while, Brendan, and just strap in with this run defense for a while until they can reinforce the ranks just a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you, though, John, for that donation. Green 80, thank you for the $14 donation. I do appreciate you on that as well, Green 80. Good to see you in the chat. It says, team is finalized. So starts the 2023 season. Go Hawks. Well put, man. Well put.
I mean, finalized is not quite the term I would use because I think there's going to be a little bit of we still got some stuff to do with this roster before we get there, but the important stuff is mostly settled. I'll say that.
Yeah, the important stuff's pretty much settled, and there wasn't a huge amount of surprises. What you're talking about is kind of the back end stuff they'll move around on this roster a little bit. Odd too that we had the Devin Bush stuff coming up out of kind of nowhere too. That popped up a couple of days ago. I didn't understand where that rumor came from today. That was a weird.
I think that was coming from Steelers fans that don't like him because he was a failure there. That's what I gleaned based on looking into it.
Okay. Jeez, dude. Like they don't let it go, huh? Like you guys have one linebacker that doesn't work out for you in 30 years and you lose your stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. I'm gonna laugh like crazy if at the end of this season Wilson gets released. So I get it. Like sometimes you don't wish your former players well.
You think it's any part of them maybe worried about, well, what if Coach Carroll with all that positive stuff, first Tomlin's kind of military rigidish kind of feeling of approach. What if this Bush guy takes off there and they're like, and he's doing really good here. And they're like, but we had him for, that's a little bit of that feeling. Are we going to feel that, maybe they're feeling that a little bit,
Right.
Like,
I mean, we've been through that before with some of these offensive linemen that leave Seattle and look better. Like Mark Lewinsky was here for years and did nothing. And then he goes to, I think, Indy and becomes a good player.
Yeah, functional starter there for them. I mean, he earned a contract extension. I think he got a second contract. So, I think that I guess I understand the bitterness a little bit, but man, they were selling that guy bad. It was making him sound horrible. They're like, want to trade, they're going to cut him if they can't do it, and all this. And it's like, okay. But Green 80, thank you for that $14 donation, man. Appreciate you. And go Hawks. Scarecrow 66 with a $5 dono. Thank you, Scarecrow. Says nice simulcast. It's a word I cannot pronounce very well, Brendan. I struggle with that one.
I think you got it.
I got it pretty much there. Thank you, Scarecrow. Both me and Brendan, if you guys don't know, you can get actually both streams up at once if you wanted to get both the algorithms going. But we've got it set up now this year. We're going to be broadcasting on both channels each time we go live twice a week. Plus, when we got some breaking news coming down the track. But thank you, Scarecrow, for the $5 donation, man. I do appreciate you, and I'm glad we were able to get this set up and going. I think it'll help. I think it'll help too.
I like it too. It's working out great so far.
Hell yeah. Scarecrow with another $5 on top of that. Thank you for that double donation. Says, am I the only one with both streams open? Doubt it.
Whenever I say in a video that I'm going to be streaming with you later that day, I always say, you can watch on my channel, you can watch on his channel, or both.
That's it. That's how you can do it, man. Support both. Have them both running. It helps on the algorithm, Scarecrow. So thanks for being on that one, man.
Yeah, there are a few different ways you can try to make the YouTube algorithm work for you, and that's definitely one of them. The other
Yeah.
ones not so. The other ones are just embarrassing and humiliating for the person involved, though. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, that can get dark really quickly too. It gets
Yeah.
dark. It goes from silly and then stupid to dark. It seems to be that's the one, two. Scarecrow, though, thank you for both those donations and also for having the double stream up, getting both of us kicking in on that algo. I appreciate you, man, and I hope you're having a great night, brother. Mr. Nolan's in the house. How you doing, Nolan? With a $5 donation. Says, have you gents had a chance to see which players other teams have released and if they could be possible targets for the Hawks? Thank you both. Oh, appreciate you so much on that one. I'll let Brendan start with this one on his.
I'll tell you, it is overwhelming. You got to go through a list of like 1,000 players. ESPN put together the whole list. I think it's the whole list. And it's just like you stare at that list and you're like, man, I'm going to have to go through this list. Probably 70% of the players I'll have never heard of before, trying to find somebody who's actually good. And sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's like, oh, I know who Danny Shelton is. I know who Jared Clark is. But a lot of the time you're just like, player I've never heard of, player I've never heard of, player I've never heard of. And it's like, I got to do this 1,000 times.
Yeah. Oh, I had the same experience as you, as people were asking me as the lists were breaking out on live stream, and I was doing the same thing. My eyes are crossing. I'm going through the list, and you and I mean, hell, we're going 280 deep on some of these prospects in this last draft, and there's still all of these names in there that we didn't have a chance to scout these guys, and they're undrafted rookie free agents that just didn't make it on with the team. One thing that stood out is there wasn't a lot of cap casualties, and that was the part that I think I was able to expect on this a little bit, Brendan, because when you looked at the sports track, all these teams have cap space as we go into the year this year a little bit that don't normally have that. And I think that's why we didn't see as many of those notable names out there for Seahawks to go and pluck, because nobody was pushed by that. When you're going to get a guy like that who's got some value left in the tank, but he's costly, and you need a team that's also up against the cap. You need all three of those to go together to have that guy get released, so then you can go get him as a depressed asset. And I just didn't see that happening in any of the teams that I saw released. I mean, not even kind of a one that I can think of. Did you? It seemed like everyone was able to get a trade off, like that one team did to the Giants with the Giants are making some moves here, man. I like some of their creative approaches, their trade, but there was that one guy they moved in a trade. Obawachim.
Didn't he go to the Eagles?
Why don't you give a run at that last name, by the way? I want to hear you give
Obugawachim.
Oh, look, it just rolls right off Brennan's tongue, huh? Okay. Yeah. So they get a trade for him. It's like those kind of guys, instead of going on the market, if there is even a little bit of value there, then a team can just trade for him because everybody has the cap space. You can just go make a 6th-round pick back the salary up, and it's no thing for you. So at least today, as it stands, this might change in the next 24 hours, Nolan. But from my side, there just wasn't a guy out there that was put out there that like there normally would be around this time. It's kind of strange. I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I was, but like you said, it doesn't seem like a lot of teams are currently in really bad financial straits. Like the Broncos traded, Albert O. That's what everybody calls him, by the way. You can just call him that, and nobody will be upset at you, I think. That wasn't a salary cap decision, was it? That was just like we can't keep him, but he has some value.
Yeah, they're not going to probably run as many 2 tight end sets. He seemed to have fallen out of favor with that organization throughout the period of last year. And then they, of course, got Greg Dulcich there last season.
Adam Troutman, I think.
Is that who they signed? Yeah, then they signed him from New Orleans, and that's Payton's guy. That's probably who Payton originally scouted. Funny enough, I take Albert O over Troutman. Troutman's a big mummy walking SOB. Like, he's like Frankenstein out there moving around. He's big and 6'8" and just.
Yeah, Albert looked really good in that last preseason game. He had like 10 catches and a touchdown and 100 yards, I think. He looked really good.
He's the one guy tight end from that draft that I kind of liked a little bit, not like a 2nd, 3rd round ways, but in like 4th, 5th round, where that draft was horrible for tight ends. He was the one that had a little bit of explosiveness to him off the line of scrimmage. But that's just there wasn't a trade like that for the Seahawks to go make in a player that's being looked at. Why do you think it is, though, there's so many teams with cap space right now this season? This weirdly right now where we stand versus other years where didn't it always seem like to you we get into seasons like this and everyone's like around 6 million of cap space and they're all or less. And there's a couple teams right with only a couple million by this point. Am I off on that? Am I remembering that wrong? Maybe. It just seems like this year right now, there's like, I looked at his teams like 15, 17. I mean, 20, 22. It's like, wow, what is this? A lot of teams not going for it this year. It's just everybody's kind of determined it's not our year.
Well, could it be this is the effect of the COVID offseason when the cap shrank and teams didn't really spend that much because there was no money to spend, and maybe it's affected things down the line here to where there aren't those big contracts because there weren't monster extensions handed out that offseason, which was now 2 off seasons ago, that are now bloating up into big 3rd years and 4th years of contracts.
I think it's a good point on your part, and certainly it would explain a little bit of this. I think also, to your point, the free agent classes the last 2 years haven't been the strongest. Have they? I mean, it's been a little bit of a weaker free agent classes where you just haven't had, those deals out there being signed by teams that are stupidly signed either. So maybe a bit of both of those two things coming together to allow for this to happen. But it does mean now you have, unfortunately for our Hawks, as this pertains to us, you don't have as much of that flexibility to benefit off of where, well, we're one of the only teams here that's got a little money and nobody else does. So now you get that depressed, cheap asset that actually has a little bit of value to them when they come to your team.
Right.
Appreciate you though, Nolan, for that donation, man. And I hope you're having a great night. Carson Schroer, thank you for being a member of the Hawks Nest for 27 months. My goodness, man. Thank you for that long time support. And he mentions the big white pink 800-pound gorilla that's in the room. Maybe not pink, maybe more Niner red, Brendan. And he says, what do y'all think about the possible Bosa trade from San Francisco to the AFC? This is so much fun to talk about. Saw a rumor swirling today, but we'll have to see how the situation plays out. I love this news.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying this one.
It's pretty obvious it's not going the way the Niners were hoping it was going to go, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think we're probably any day now we're going to get an announcement that Bosa will miss week 1, and then it's just kind of a running clock until he gets back.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they want to pay Ayuk, right? They definitely want to play Ayuk because they paid Debo and now might be regretting it. We'll see. He did not play well last year.
Yeah. And he's not likely to get help. They got to be looking at that thinking, is his health going to hold up?
Yeah. They already extended McCaffrey. The thing that makes this so weird to me, I know he's asking for a lot of money. I understand that. But they're not paying a quarterback and they won't have to for some years. So this is when you can just go for it and say, okay, fine, we'll pay a ridiculous amount of money to a defensive player and we'll regret it in a few years, but hopefully we'll have a Super Bowl by then. Like, I don't understand how they've let it get to this point. I think this is very, very, I don't know why this is the line in the sand that they're drawing. Like, they paid Eric Armstead, but we're going to draw a line in the sand on Bosa. I don't get it.
Well, it's in looking at it from my standpoint, just doing a tiny bit of research with it and this was all very foggy stuff, Brendan. So this is take it with a grain of salt. There's some wonder about whether or not that particular owner is very financially flush. And if you're going to sign a 4-year, $35 million deal, so that's going to come out to $140 million, 4 years. You're probably in the neighborhood of about $100 million guarantees, if not more than that in that deal. In fact, probably about 115-ish. Would be in guarantees, not bonus. It'd probably be about $80 million bonus and 115, 120 in guarantees. Now, as we know with the rules, that means you got to throw $120 million into escrow the day he signs that deal. I've heard rumors of insider trading type stuff with the potential with the allegedly, maybe with the Niner owner. And so I don't know if that comes into this. There was the DeForest Buckner situation with this too. And in retrospect, where he was in negotiations with the team. And part of the reason he was moved was not simply just because there was a decision between Armstead and Forrest and they went, well, we'll go with Armstead. It was because Armstead was going to give him a much more viable deal than the one that Buckner was offering or wanting. And they didn't want to sign the Buckner deal at that time to that kind of money. And that pushed the trade. So there is a baseline for this occurring once before from this Niner organization. And we're talking about $35 million a year, Brennan. I mean, I'm firmly in the camp of saying the reason this deal isn't done, it's not because he's not asking for 30. If it was 30, it would have gotten done. His brother signed for 27.5 3 years ago.
Yeah.
30 would have gotten this done. This is about 35, and this is about the Bosa brothers with their father having the same things happen to him that happened with Jamal Adams' dad, a pro wasn't able to really get in and cash in the 80s because they were cold-blooded back then with the players in the 80s. You weren't getting paid,
Right.
and you're getting body beat to hell. And those fathers taught their sons and taught them well. And just like Joey Bosa held those Chargers right over the barrel the second he could, so will Nick in this situation, and it's wonderful. And it very well could lead to a trade, Brendan. You bring up the Ayuk thing, which I hadn't thought as much about today, but that's a good part of this because it becomes no decision happens in a vacuum. Bosa and his contract minus Ayuk, or the returns from Bosa plus Ayuk, what's more value to the Niners? And it would be a pragmatic way to go to the second part of that, Brendan. But of course, it would also mean that they dampen down this year's potential for a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, and my belief is that as an owner, if your priority is not winning championships, then sell the team. Like, why do you even own the team if you're not going to prioritize winning championships? If you're just going to prioritize money, or you're in a position where you have to prioritize money, you shouldn't own the team. Like Robert Sarver, who owned the Phoenix Suns for years during the Nash era, famously gave away first-round picks, gave them away because he didn't want to pay them. And they never won a title, and he is one of the most reviled people in Phoenix history. He goes to Phoenix, he's getting everybody in town spitting in his drink on his when he stops in at the bar. Like that, what's the point? So of course I'm thrilled to watch it, sitting here watching it play out. But objectively speaking, I can't believe there are still situations where a team is forced to make decisions because their owner doesn't have enough money to make the right decision.
Yeah, I agree with you. It would frustrate the hell out of me as a Niner fan. It's something you and I have worried a little bit about where we're at with ownership now, where we're going in the future with our team, because it holds you back. It can hinder you. There are so many little things you can take as advantages across the board to help you win football games. And you start removing those items off the table one by one and then hoping to get it done with what remains. It's going to be harder to do when other teams get to call upon the full allotment of those advantages. And this would be definitely, if they were to move Bosa, to me, an indication that there is some financial stiffness, some tight-waddedness in that organization. I think you would have already known this ahead of time with Bosa when I don't know, I guess Joey didn't have his deal signed, but you knew this was coming down the track with Bosa when Joey signed that deal, that you probably weren't getting a discount here. Certainly Joey didn't give one.
Yeah.
And then this is also like, if you're going to be a championship level roster team, you're going to end up paying out contracts. You're going to end up rewarding guys. You're going to end up, and I don't know, the guy that's been maybe one of the most important pieces of that time period. I mean, it was him being picked as that number one overall pick, where they went from the worst team in the league to then going to the Super Bowl the next year. It was him as the one real presence there that came into play that year that allowed them to ascend so quickly in that manner. It defies logic that they're in this position, Brendan. And I don't mind. I've said, as I said in my Lance video a couple of, if they want to shoot themselves in the foot, shoot them both feet if you want, and if they move Bosa, that's not going to bode well for the Niners' future. It's not like they've been drafting awesome. It's not like they've been just tearing it up in the draft recently.
No, I think they've the Buckner trade led to Javon Kinlaw, who some people were wondering if he was going to get cut today. That's how that's going. They spent a third round pick on a kicker who isn't any good, I guess, is what it's looking like. Apparently it's not going well. He's already hurt. They drafted a tight end in the third round that they were apparently going to cut until they were able to get him on IR.
And he looked awful. They were just, and I warned him, like, it was Latu. We could have told him.
Yeah, Latu.
We hated Latu.
I remember looking at him in the offseason. I recall that.
Yeah, he was dog water, man. I mean, I'm sorry, but he was. He was an Alabama tight end. Whoopee. He did not have a good skill set. So it works out good if they want to offload talent like this in the direction. And man, this year it's hard to say that they're now a front runner for this division then if they move to Bosa, because you're just getting picks at that point. I don't know which AFC team it would be that would be the one to do this. I was thinking maybe the Chargers. Maybe the Chargers could come in and offer Khalil Mack, and then in a swirl of first and second round picks on top of it. Something like that.
Oh man. Wow. You just reminded me. I remember back in 2019, there was a rumor that the Bosa brothers were going to try to make it so that they could both play in San Fran at the same time. Because of course, at that point, between the Chargers and the Niners, where would you think the talent would want to go? But if it ends up going the other way, wow, that is quite a turnaround.
Yeah, I could see them coming in and doing it from a Chargers perspective. They've been aggressive in recent times. They know where they're at with that roster as it's getting closer and closer. Herbert's looking like the real deal, and you put the Bosas on either side of him. Boy, that'd be a tough. Boy, poor Russ.
Hmm.
poor Russ at that point with what he's dealing with there off the edge if it goes. I think my two front runners, Brendan, on this AFC team, if this is a true rumor, and we don't know if this is a true rumor, but what Carson is referencing, by the way, folks, I didn't put a background to this. There was a guy last year that broke the Christian McCaffrey trade on Reddit. That same user that broke that trade before anybody else is breaking that there is a blockbuster trade that's being put together by the San Francisco 49ers in an unnamed AFC team. That's where all of this is kind of coming from. So take that what you will. But Jacksonville, Brendan, he just got a home down in Florida. Maybe a Jacksonville or even a Miami team that's been aggressive in the past. I don't know if Miami be willing to do it or have the money to do it, but I think Jacksonville would have the cap space to pull that off. Because that's what you have to do is you have to sign him to the $35 million deal after you trade for him. And that would be an incredible deal for Jacksonville to pull off. They're a little early, they're a little low, but I don't know.
That may be a Super Bowl contender at that point.
I could see it. I could. I think they would be. They're definitely like still got some issues here and there defensively, but Lawrence is going to carry the day offensively for them. They've given him enough playmakers and the offensive line's kind of coming together. So I would if I was the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. Hard as it is to bite on that, I think you pull it and you go, yeah, let's do it. I mean, this is and maybe you could even round it out where you flip them back. The who's that kid that got Josh Allen?
Oh yeah, the other Josh Allen.
Yeah, maybe you flip back Josh Allen to satiate him a little bit and help out the Niners for this upcoming year. But
yeah,
we'll see, man. If it happens, if it comes down, we'll have to do an emergency stream on your side of it, Brendan, if the trade comes down.
Oh yeah. Maybe it'll be like last year and we'll break it on stream, doing an unrelated stream.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That's what happened with the McCaffrey thing.
I do remember that. That was a bummer, though. This one will be a complete and utter celebration.
I didn't think that was a bummer. I thought they overpaid like crazy for CMC, and I still kind of think they did because good luck keeping him healthy this year. You kept him healthy for 1 year. You made some crazy deal with a fairy godmother to keep him healthy for 1 year. Good luck this year.
That's true, man. And every year he's usually been banged up, and he's gotten a lot of, man, the wear and tear in that first 3 years by the Panthers, like 300 carries and 100 catches on top of it, just obscene. And what we've learned about that in the past with running backs is that comes back to that comes back, and you feel that in a major way down the road. So that's a good point with it. I liked it. It was from there at that time, Brendan, with what they were doing, though they had gotten those picks for free with all of the kind of the minority higher compensation part of it that you get in the NFL. And they were just it was like free picks in their back pocket. So to me, it was like, he did kind of help to take that offense up a notch. They were more productive than ever when he was in there and doing what he was doing. But the health part on your side of it is a valid thing. That's a major issue with him because it's just been something he's struggled with throughout his career. He's not the biggest of guys. He is kind of slight. Taker 610, thank you for the $2 donation. Says Chris Jones and Nick Bosa are still unsigned. Indeed, they are both unsigned.
Yeah. I mean, the difference is the Chiefs can be fine without Chris Jones.
Mm-hmm.
They can still score 35 points a game and probably win most games they play. The Niners, the seat of their power is going to be their defense. They are dependent on having a top 3 defense this year. And without Bosa, I don't think they're top 3. Like, their secondary is already not that good.
Agreed.
So you take things out of that front 7, including the most important thing on that front 7, and that's not a top 3 defense. They lost D'Amico Ryans too, if you think that matters, which it may.
Mm-hmm. After losing Robert Saleh recently before that. So, I mean, how many times can you strike kind of gold with the defensive coordinator prospect or whatnot? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, is this going to be like a middling offense and a middling defense this year, and they just are a middling team? That's kind of how it feels like this is going to go without Bosa.
Well, the big key with me going back to Brock Purdy on this is that they're going to try to keep Brock in a box, and that is protect him in the passing attack game. This was the 32nd team in the NFL in air yards from the quarterback position last year. That's because they dink and they dunk. There is no other reason why. And if you start to now press them offensively to where you're scoring points on their defense and they've got to stay tit for tat with you, and that offense has to start throwing the ball more, and they have to have Brock start to make some real NFL throws now. I think that does sort of spell doom for the Niners if they get into that. Like you say, they need the defense for it to all come together and work right. The running game to work off the defense. It is really the circle of the way that works for their team. They're like
Mhm.
what Carroll tries to aspire for with his team with that in the toughness angle and how you go out and win football games. But one needs the other. And if you don't have a defense that can stop anybody or stop anybody like they were before, then you can't just kind of play as that kind of conservative realm as much and just hope you can Debo and Christian McCaffrey are going to house it on 5-yard hitches all day, you know? And I maintain eventually somebody's going to play Brock where they're going to start squeezing him, Brendan. Somebody's going to this year start squeezing those short routes and be like, show me you can throw a 9 route. Show me you can put it 45 yards on the line. Show me that you can do it. And I still don't see teams taking away that underneath stuff on him yet. And maybe that's just some of Shanahan's great scheming, but somebody's going to do it, man. I hope we do it. It's going to drive me crazy if we play them again. We just drop into soft zones like we did in the playoffs, Brendan, where we didn't play with a lot of aggressiveness in that game. Instead, just being like, we'll just chill. Let's dial it up, you know?
I agree. Dallas kind of did it in the playoffs the next week. They still lost, but Dallas's defense pretty much took them away, right?
They did a lot better job by being a little more aggressive and pressing it, to your point. It was as much, I think, Dallas's offense and Dak not necessarily being able to do against, and the Niners defense is good. It's hard to go out there and score a lot of points against them. So they just couldn't do as much offensively at that point to get it done. They were down their back too. So they were down some guys. I mean, Cowboys were like us, kind of limping on in at that point, at least on the offensive side of the ball. But we'll just have to see how it goes with it, man. We'll have to see how this season goes with it. It'd be crazy if Bosa gets moved, but we'll have to see. There is 2 different things there, like you say on that. Jones, they can sit. Kansas City can. Bosa, I was also, this is interesting part, Brendan, on the 5th-year option, he's not getting the $50,000 a day fine that can't be forgiven like Jones is. On the 5th-year option, you don't get fined like that. So he gives him the opportunity to sit back a little bit more here and just kind of head behind the hands like, I'll wait. You know, I ain't going to cost anything.
I can go borrow money from my brother if I really need
it. Big bro's got a couple extra million in his back pocket. He can carry me for a little while.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it goes. I'm stoked to see that news today and explain some of the dour faces of Shanahan and Lynch the other day at that Lance press conference. You know, I failed, Trey. He was in a dark place there, man. It was awesome to see. Well, let's talk a little bit more on this Packer game. We don't have to go, I think, too much of a deep dive. I think more of what we want to do here and just come away with our takeaways with the preseason period. And again, this was an odd game because of the way that you had to play against the Packers and who they were running out there at the forefront. Jake Bobo is a guy I think we got to talk about just a little bit here, Brendan, and just had a sensational preseason, and the guys rose up further and further. He now gets a roster spot as it's announced today, which was wonderful to see. He had earned it, no doubt about it. And I don't have a lot to add with this. I'm hoping maybe you do on top of this. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing with them. The Joe Jurevicius comps feel right. And again, in this game, he only made a couple of catches, but they both stood out to me. And he just seems like a guy that can play inside, outside now. We didn't know about that before. So very encouraged by this kid.
Yeah, there's not really much you can say that hasn't already been said. We've been talking about this guy nonstop, and I wasn't really a believer when we picked him up. I thought there's no way this is going to work in the NFL, but I gotta say he's found a way to make it work. There's no other way you can put it. He's found a very creative and curious way to make it work. It's like an extreme version of what JSN does in a way, right? Because JSN's not really fast, but he's always open. Jake Bobo is even slower, considerably slower than JSN, but he finds a way to get open, and he's doing it against real players. This is not just like a bunch of guys who are going to be delivering for UPS and Amazon in a couple weeks. That touchdown he had in the first week was against Andrew Booth, who was, I think, a 2nd-round pick. And I have a good deal of confidence in him going into week 1 when we will probably need him.
Yeah. He was out there basically starting for you because you weren't starting DK, you weren't starting Tyler, except for the one game there for a little bit. But he was out there, you know, running from that starting point at that point. To your point, and he showed you that running the receiver position is not all about speed. It can be about releases. It can be about route running, body control. And I do believe that we still have another part of his game we haven't seen yet, Brendan, which is his red zone ability, and then what he can do at the stem of the route to create separation, which is another part which helps him. I think comp to JSN's also apropos because of the fact it's the short area explosion. I don't know that he's a fast shuttle guy, but he's got better explosion than he should have for a guy at 6'4" and his size when he wants to get 3 steps this way, 3 steps that way off of going in this other direction. And that's something that I think could lead to him getting getting some success here at the NFL level and carving himself out a position in this league and finding his way on the field. And, there's not a clear pathway to having it happen here, but it's wonderful to have for depth, Brendan. He could play inside, outside. It looks like now that's great, especially with where we're at with the injury situation in the receiver core. And so just a good performance on his part. I don't think that there's anything really worth mentioning on the other side. Aesop Winston had 3 catches, 73 yards, the one drive. They released him. He's probably going to go to, I would imagine, the practice squad here.
If he gets there.
It's kind of fringy there. Offensively, aside from that, there wasn't much else, that stood out to me in the game. So Roderick didn't have a lot of running room. None of the running backs in this preseason period had much running back room to go with, but he still played well for what he was given. He did fine with what was there. Was there anybody else offensively for you that stood out or was noteworthy coming out of this game?
No, I think that covers it pretty good. You had the Bobo touchdown, you had the Aesop Winston Jr. drive, and those were the highlights. It wasn't a great day for the offense overall. We struggled to move the ball. Understandable early on because it was our backups against their starters. But I don't think there really is that much else to highlight. A lot of the guys who played aren't on the team right now even.
Yeah, that's where it gets kind of quick and concise, I think, at least on that side of the ball. Let's talk about a little bit of a negative aspect of this that I think we do have to discuss in regards to this game, and that's the performance in back-to-back weeks of Michael Jackson Jr. What do you make of this, Brendan? Make it make sense to me. This guy was supposed to be dominant this minicamp, Carroll said. Close to dominant, I think he said. Let me use his words right. What happened?
I don't know. I don't know, but what I do know is I care more about what he did last year in the regular season across a full year than what he does in 2 preseason games. So a lot of people are already, trying to throw this guy off the boat, trying to get him out of here. I'm not with that, but I don't know. It's weird, right? It is kind of odd. He's playing against guys who won't even make their team's respective rosters, and he's getting kind of beat up. And Trey Brown does look better. Trey Brown does look better through the preseason. We'll see if the team's final starting lineup decisions reflect that. But I don't know. I think this is kind of the thing where we've had nothing to digest but preseason football for such a long period of time that we're putting too much emphasis on the preseason, forgetting what this guy did last year.
Agreed. All the way down the line on this one. I think we have to understand the evaluation, like the Drew Lock, Geno Smith competition last year, is one that takes place over mini camps, through training camp, through the scrimmage game, through the preseason games. And it's all of that combined together that determines what is what, who's cut, who's going to be starting. Trey Brown, indeed, the last 2 weeks has played better. He's a little struggled in the first week. The tackling remains a bit of an issue with Trey Brown, and that's not something that is an issue with Jackson. But he's had a struggle of it. And I think the thing that stands out to me on this, is above anything on this, Brendan, is he's had his 2 worst games that I've seen from him as a Seahawk. So this is not Mike Jackson of what we saw last year. And there were games where he had some struggles at times, but he's been kind of bad the last 2 weeks. I don't think that's a representation of who he is. Let's see what happens when we get to live games. I'm open to Trey Brown winning this job. And if it's announced that he is the number 1 cornerback with Woolen on the other side, I'll go, okay, it makes sense. I mean, Brown looked really good that first year. He was a very, very impressive rookie. So if he's ready to come back out there and harness back into that ability that he had in that rookie season, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah, he was actually tackling pretty good, by the way, in this preseason overall. I felt like he had a couple nice plays coming up, hitting guys down in the flat, had a couple plays in the backfield, I think, making good tackles. So it's not the worst, but I don't know. That one's tough. At the end of the day, I'm not thinking about it that hard because I feel like both guys are just keeping the spot warm for Witherspoon. But it is weird that Jackson could have been so good in training camp and so bad now.
Yeah. I mean, all indications are was working his butt off heading into a contract year. if he goes out and he balls out for two, goes even better than last year, he puts himself in a position to maybe go get a contract. We've seen Shaquille Griffin. We've seen DJ Reed. We've seen these types come through and find a way to get themselves into another well-paid contract beyond what their time here in Seattle, if they can do that. So there's a lot on the line here for Michael Jackson to be better than what he's been this preseason, but I'm not going to come to final determinations on that as well. And yeah, very impressed with Trey Brown. It was more the first game of the preseason where he was really bad in that respect. And PFF didn't like his tackling throughout the preseason at all. Down the line, but it's just something to monitor more than it is to be an impediment from him starting. He's really good in coverage, and he works really well with this defense too, because he's got that innate ability to stay close to a receiver while still stacking the receiver on cover three. So much of cover three with like Jackson is I drop to bail depth and I'm always creating this cushion between me and the receiver so that I'm ensuring I'm staying on top. But if you're a guy like Brown who feel like he can trust his wheels, he can sort of pin that receiver on his back. And he's got that weird thing where he can always kind of stay in front of the receiver, even if the receiver's faster than him, because he just sort of does that move of the little brother move where I'm trying to let me by. Will you just let me, it's a little bit of that going on. So I think he could have an opening to it. Another guy that played really good. Let's talk about this guy. He's got me super stoked. I think do we got a free safety for the future, Brendan?
We got something for the future. We got something. Yeah.
We might just have it here. Jarek Reed, man. Goodness. He had a good game, I thought. 2 tackles for losses all over the field. A good
He was our best player.
Very much so. Yeah, I think you could make the argument very much so in this game. And when we looked at him, what was he, a pro day 4.3, 4.42, 4.37 pro day?
Around there. Something I can't remember exactly.
It
was something better than you would expect for a 6th round pick, I guess, is the right way to put it.
That's right. And much faster than anybody at the combine. He's got a gear. He's got an NFL level gear to him. And he showed that he's got that willingness, like Schneider said, to go out there and play with a bit of a chip on his shoulder and be a little bit angry in the way he goes, which is just what you want from a defender. But he was tackling. He was out there in coverage in the preseason, put a stamp on it in this final game, I thought. Playing instinctive on those tackle for losses, coming up there and really, filling the hole, filling his gap, not just kind of coming up willy-nilly. He's a free safety kind of body. Sometimes those guys are a little advert, to having contact and coming up and being real super physical. But he put his nose in there, and I've got some hope with this kid to maybe be a guy that down the road we're looking at it as maybe if as Quandre Diggs gets a little bit older, a guy that can maybe step in for him down the road. Or if he goes down to an injury, I feel at least some confidence that he can fill in and do an adequate job.
In a different timeline, we'd be talking about him playing now. We can't really because we've got so much stuff going on at safety.
It's true. Yeah.
There's a timeline here where we'd be like, we got to get this guy on the field now.
Well, if you hadn't signed Quandre Diggs, and, you've gone into this offseason now with it and the way it's at, I mean, they probably would have drafted a free safety higher, but there wasn't a lot of free safeties in this draft, so maybe not. And yeah, you're right. To your point, I think that this guy would have been driving people to say, why didn't you start him? Who cares? He's 6th round. He looks good. Let's go. Let's let him roll on this. But he was very impressive in this game. Love what I see from this kid. He's got me very hopeful and just makes already what looks like a strong draft class, Brendan, look kind of ridiculous. Kind of like Tyreek Smith stepping forward from last year's draft class to make that draft class look even more ridiculous. Another guy who balled out this preseason. Where are you standing on Tyreek Smith, the Ohio State product?
Better than I would have expected, for sure. Playing the run pretty well, getting a little bit of action in on the quarterback. Today wasn't as good. I mean, this week wasn't as good as the last week, obviously. In fact, I mean, if you think about our defense in this Packers game, how many times did we have great coverage? Packers quarterback drops back, looks. We got all the coverage locked up. And then the QB, whoever it was, just runs for a first down. That happened over and over and over again. So it wasn't a great day for the pass rush, but Tyreek Smith looks like he belongs in the NFL. And for your 5th edge rusher, that's really all you can ask for, I think.
It is indeed. And he's got an NFL body. He moves like an NFL edge. He doesn't look like a guy that's like missing length, size, quickness. And a guy who maybe has some hopes for some upside, remembering as well, he's played this well this preseason, Brendan, having not played a whole year the year prior. He's just getting back into football. And so maybe there's a little bit of hope here. He continues to get even a little bit better as we go along. But a lot of people in my chat, maybe in yours as well, had a lot of consternation of the potential of Levi Bell over Smith. Because as I said, and as you said on this, they're not carrying 6 edges. So it was going to be a choice between the two. And it's one where I just think this is a smart choice from their standpoint on it. As good as Levi Bell played, went back and watched Brendan on some all 22 snaps. They tried him inside in the Packer game. They tried. And
Yeah.
he got ramrodded a little bit in there. It
That
wasn't
made
even
me
going to
feel
work.
like we were actually going to keep him. I was like, if we're trying this, we must be like, okay, let's figure out how we can use him because we're going to keep him. But I guess it didn't go well enough. I guess the experiment failed.
There was no good tape to go off of, because if you're going to put him there and you go, okay, let's get 20 snaps of him inside and let's see if we get a flash or two in there to give us hope. And he didn't give you those flashes. He was just getting manhandled in there a little bit. And that's unfortunate, but it does mean you can't keep the sixth edge. And, you got to, hopefully you can stash Levi in the practice squad. We'll see. I don't know how many teams are going to be looking for a 6'1" guy, 275, that they can put on their active roster right now as a starter off the edge. Maybe one of the bottom end teams like a Cardinals team or whatever, just looking to add guys. But I think you'll get him back on the practice squad. And no doubt the Hawks will be looking to put him there,
Yeah, I feel like a team that's bad, like the Cardinals or Texans, team that can afford to mess around with an experimental player will probably get him before then. If I had to
Agreed.
guess.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Somebody's going to probably, a 3-4 team out there, give it a try, just let it run and see. With as good as he was this preseason, because he was one of the highest rated PFF defenders out there in the National Football League in this preseason period.
Mhm.
We'll just have to see what they can pull off. But you and me both support the cut. I don't know that there's an upside here with Levi Bell as an edge in the future. Somebody was like, well, he's a James Harrison. I'm like, he's built like James Harrison, but I don't know. I still don't know if that means there's really a place there for him.
Yeah, I would have been fine with keeping him, but I got no issue with this either. Like, yeah, I mean, we're getting a little too excited. We've been here before with preseason superstars that the superstardom ends when the preseason does.
Well said. Exactly.
Mhm.
Another guy that wasn't a superstar but did lead the NFL in tackles this preseason was Mr. John Radigan.
Mhm.
Yeah,
He was better in this game than the
yeah,
first game, I think. I'll
yeah.
say that.
I think
He wasn't terrible.
he's okay against the run. It's just the coverage stuff for me that gets to be a bit of a
Mhm.
struggle with him for my money.
I feel like most linebackers are bad in coverage. I feel like that's just like a current deficiency in the market. Like it's hard to find good cover linebackers these days.
Only going to aid in that transition to the safeties taking over their jobs, Brendan, if this continues in the future, with these kind of guys like that. So
Yeah.
if that tends to be the trend there, then it's going to go that way. But look, he's a special teams guy who's going to be unless the Steeler fans trade rumors are correct, he'll be your fourth middle linebacker on this roster. So probably
Maybe
not.
fifth if you count Belor.
That's true. You think Belor's getting ahead of it? No. Ratty going to be on the field before Belor.
Well, we played Belor at linebacker before, I remember.
Wasn't Rattigan injured though at that time? Wasn't he like weirdly
Well,
beat
no,
up?
Radigan was on the practice squad. He was there.
Oh, okay.
Remember, he was part of that pipeline from Euro NFL to the NFL, where like you get a free practice squad spot if it's a European Football League player.
Mm,
So he was chilling on our practice squad at that time, I think. But it wouldn't shock me if we trusted Belor more than Radigan. But at that point, who cares? If you have that many injuries happening to you at linebacker, you're probably in trouble anyway.
yeah, it's you've got bigger problems at the end of the day. It's a problem, but there's probably a bigger problem going on at that time.
Mhm.
Kevin Low Nice, thank you for the $10 donation. I appreciate it, Kevin. He says, I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but I'm loving the news out of San Francisco. Looking better and better. Go Hawks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that donation. And dysfunction is always nice to see. And that fan base right now is really wringing their hands over this land situation. And some have their piece with it, and they're let's go Purdy or let's go Darnold. But others are also like, wait, no, they've messed this situation up. This is bad. This is not a good thing here of what they've done. This isn't a good solution to our issues. And I think they're looking at this year, as you and I have wondered about, the ground underneath the Niners is much more shakier than ever before. It's much more built of sand than it's been built of concrete in the past. And those sand will fall away and drift out. We'll see if it does come to bloom this year. It still takes a year or two to kind of kick in. But if they move Bosa, Brendan, I don't care what they're getting back in return. I mean, that to me removes them off of being the front runner here for this division, much less the NFC at that point. That guy makes that defense run. Like you said, the defense's runs that team, this to this to this. You take that out. There's not a guy that's out there like Nick Bosa that you're going to get that's even close as a return.
Yeah, yeah. I think at that point I would definitely have to say we should be better than the Niners. I'm not saying we will be, but we should be at that point.
Yeah.
If that happens, that'll push me over the edge here a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll be right there with you on that edge because I think he's their most important player, maybe beyond anybody else on that roster. And you take away the most important player, it's going to harm your team. It's going to significantly take you down. Doesn't matter whether you're Niners, the Hawks, or anybody else in that realm of things. So I'm trying not to too, Kevin. I'm just trying to be. But again, the guy broke the story last year with McCaffrey. He was the first to break it. Maybe this guy knows somebody and knows something's going on. And if it's like he says that they've been working on this trade, a blockbuster deal has been in the works for weeks. It gets harder to hold these things under wraps the longer that you're trying to make it a complicated deal work. So that does make it to where now it's likely something gets leaked out. Somebody hears that, wait, they're in the middle of just about getting this deal done with this. This would be the way that would go. We'll just have to see, Kevin. We'll have to see. Mumbles, thank you for the $20 donation. Mumbles, it's good to see you guys in the house. Good to see you too, Mumbles. Says, did you hear Brandon Perna saying that if Locke in the last game threw the ball in a regular game, it would have been taken back as a pick six as a ball, saying it like it was against starters, it would have been picked? He sounds salty.
Yeah, I don't really know what he's trying to imply there. Is he saying that if it was like a starting NFL player, he would have picked it off and it was dropped because it was a third string, fourth string cornerback, maybe?
And is he saying on that one interceptable worthy throw? Is that what this is a reference to? Is the one throw Locke made in that game?
That's the only thing I can think of.
And yeah, I'm sure he is salty because I'm sure he also knows if Drew Lock was on our team last year rather than Russell Wilson, we probably would have gone to the playoffs. So I mean, Brendan, they only need to score 20 points in the first 10 games, and they're 9-1. Lock couldn't have scored 20 points for him. I mean, that offense was beyond.
I'm inclined to agree. I mean, I'm
not saying he would have been top 15. I'm not saying even a top 20. I think a top 23 quarterback could have gotten you 20 points a game. And
the modern NFL, yeah.
Yeah. And so I just, Perna probably knows that in the back of his head. So you're right. He's a bit salty about that. And it was a pick six throw. It's a throw that a lot of times is taken back as a pick six. He's not wrong about that. But it was also the only throw of that nature that Locke made in this game, in which he played 3.5 quarters of the football game up until the last drive. So, if you get through a quarterback through a whole game and he's thrown one turnover worthy that would have been a pick six or it's just a pure interception. That's not the worst thing in the world, especially in a game when he's under a lot of duress, like Brendan talked about. Why? Because you have your second stringers in there against the first stringers, and then your third stringers and they're, third stringers against their second stringers. That's how that worked too, Brendan. Losing that second half is it meant that it wasn't just the starters in there. It meant that when they went to the second stringers, you were already getting to your thirds because you're in the last preseason game and that's what you do. And they were just going to their number twos. So yeah, I mean, he can be bitter about it. Can't blame him, Mumbles. And the sad part for him is he's going to be bitter about it for quite a bit of time because that issue there with Denver's not getting better anytime soon. It doesn't sound like they've got it worked out just looking at it on the outside, looking in on this either.
Yeah. Is this 2 straight years of them being the most injury-riddled team in the league? I think so.
It's shaping up that way. I mean, they've already lost basically 3 starters at least. I mean, Patrick's a starter kind of. The other receiver alone they're both kind of starters in the way they play it because Patrick's kind of an inside slot guy for him. Hamler being kind of your outside guy a little bit. But they've had some losses. And
I think it was yesterday it was announced Kawan Williams, their starting nickel corner, was going to be out for at least 4 months. Jeez. So he's probably done for the year at that point. Like, why come back in late December? The Jonas Griffith was a part-time starter for them. So, who's been hit with injuries harder than the Broncos so far? You guys got to remember, it's not just the injuries. It's the who's getting hurt and how long are they going to miss. For Denver, it's getting ravaged by that.
Judy again, too. Judy went down to another injury.
Yeah, if I had to guess, he'll miss the first 2 or 3 games.
Yeah. Still though, I mean, when you're already gotten down some guys, then you're losing even more on top. It gets down to that low end point really quickly.
Baron Browning, I think, is also going to miss at least 1 game.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah, that's their edge too. If not their edge one.
Well, they were betting on him to help replace the guy they traded to Miami. Who the edge they traded to Miami
Bradley
last year. Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, and he looked good at times, but he had a hard time staying. Him and Nick Bonito is probably their edges now, and both those guys had a hard time staying healthy last year too. So they, I don't think it's a rejuvenation year for the Broncos this year, and I think that Jared Stidham might just be quarterback before the end of the year there. Would not surprise me in the least on that one. But,
He looked good against the Rams.
He did. He looked really good against them, But if you think Pern is bitter right now, Mumbles, wait until we're raising the Lombardi at the end of the year. wait till we got a dynasty in the crosshairs potentially. Imagine how bitter a pill that'd be for years having to watch another organization just feasting on the picks. You gave another one to the tune of getting to Super Bowls,
Mm-hmm.
Ouch. That
Yeah.
that stings a bit. Mumbles, thank you for the $20 donation though, man. Very, very kind of you. Very kind of you. Mumbles also been a member for 10 months. Thank you for being the member of the channel as you've been, Mumbles, for that long period of time. He says it could have been, but not for that reason.
I'm sure this is in reference to something
the pick.
In the chat.
No, the pick, because he was the guy that did this on this. So he was just putting it on.
Oh, yeah.
It could have been, but not for that reason. Yeah, it was a bad throw, but sometimes that ball's picked off, sometimes it isn't. We always go back to whether you're the number 1 or number 2 cornerback on a football team. You're playing cornerback oftentimes and not receiver because you don't have the best of hands. And so there's a lot of corners in this league that are starting cornerbacks who can't catch a cold. They can have that kind of throw happen like that in that situation, and it goes and plops off their hands, and that's just the way it is, especially with Drew Lock throwing like he does, because he throws with some velocity. So you're trying to catch a ball out away from your body, coming in hot from about 7.5, 10 yards away. Yeah, easier said than done on that kind of catch. But it was a turnover worthy play, and but to get caught up on that part of Lock from that game, I don't know. That was not exactly to me the example of how he was playing.
Stuff is going to happen when Drew Lock is the quarterback. He's going to be one of these guys that turns it over a little more than average. I think you just got to deal with that.
I agree. I think it's just a part of this game. Maybe it'll be like with Gino, where you get another 5 years down the line in the development, that starts to get a little bit more pittered out a bit, but it's here right now. He does give you the wow throws and some good ability with it. He gives you the good mobility Brendan talked about in addition to it. So he does bring some stuff to the table with that. But Mumbles, thank you for being a member of the channel, man, and that $20 donation. John coming in with another $5. Says Bosa to the Dolphins for Christian Wilkins, first and seconds.
You might have to do a little bit better than that, but we're talking. We're getting there.
I think that might get it done. That might be close to getting it. There might be one more kicker pick you throw in there, but that might be enough to get the deal done there, John.
What did Mac go for? Was that 2 firsts?
I think it was 2 firsts, kind of like 2 firsts and a third, fifth thing, something like that.
Okay. That's right there. I mean, Christian Wilkins, I guess he's really well respected around the league, despite not putting up big numbers. Like, people genuinely think he's like a Pro Bowl caliber defensive lineman, despite not putting up big numbers.
He's probably, to me, a top 7 to 8 guy in the sport. Probably worth a first round pick because of his age, as he's still on a rookie contract too. So my bet, maybe, and I'd love to hear if you think the same way. I'm with Bosa being worth probably 2 firsts and 2 seconds. And maybe I should be adding more onto that. And maybe that's why the Niners are being willing to move him here. If they are going to be willing to move him, is that he's worth actually more than that. But okay, so 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a third, right? I mean, we wouldn't, quibble. I don't think it's much more further past that. But John, I think that that's a pretty creative spot, and that's probably a deal that if the Niners are looking to move, I don't know if they're going to get a lot more better than that. Especially when you combo in the Wilkins side of that as a player. Like, they might get a kicker player from the Jacksonville Jaguars, like a Josh Allen, but he's all right. Wilkins is legitimately, really, really good. Better than what the Niners have in that line right now at the position, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. That would, if they pulled that off, that might actually not be a terrible thing for the Niners. Like, I mean, I couldn't even clown on them that much if they got that.
You brought up the Brandon Ayuk part, which I think is a very important part of this, because that is a part that connects to this decision. If you're paying $35 million a year to Nick Bosa, you can't afford to pay what is Ayuk going to be worth? 20, 25 million? What's his value out at that point for the Niners? And there's no way either if it's 20 or it's 25. I say 25 because you have so many of those receivers. You have from DK to AJ Brown. There's a couple of guys in that realm just a couple of years ago that all signed right in that mark. So it's like now you're a couple of years ahead of time, and it's inflation's a bitch, So it's like I'm thinking,
what did DK get again? 23.
23, but AJ got pure 25.
then I think Ayuk could ask for like 28.
I
I know
agree.
he's not as good as those guys, but as we've learned, that doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
inflation is what it is. We're all learning that here in America. So that's the part of this that comes into it, Brendan, is that it's not just about Bosa, it's also Bosa, and it's the loss of Ayuk that comes into this if you sign Bosa. So if they look at it as what's better, Bosa minus Ayuk, and that's it, or you got Christian Wilkins, a first, 2 seconds, and Brandon Ayuk minus Nick Bosa. It's an interesting theory here, Brendan, in roster building to me on this. I mean, it really is kind of an interesting in the way you consider it. And it's a bind. I mean, the bottom line, you don't want to be spending $35 million on a defensive player, bar none. That's double the rate of a Jamal Adams.
Yeah. Well, that's why you extend him last year
Yes.
before like I can't believe they botched that. But
Yeah.
if they pulled off this Dolphins trade, I wouldn't even make fun of them. Like I would be like, you know what? They did good.
I would have a hard time landing where you're ending on that because your first point you just made a second ago. They botched this up by trying to rob. We'll get one more year off. Like I've said, they did the Dak Prescott thing that Dallas did. You could have rewarded him, got him in at a decent deal. You waited, and now you're kind of moaning about paying the price. And while as Wilkins does help them, and he does like make that defense still okay this year, they're nowhere near the same place as far as their edge group goes and what they're bringing off the edge as far as, you got the Drake kid from USC. Umanuya is over there with the Kansas City Chiefs, and he had almost starter-like reps off the edge on the other side last year at times. Yeah, they got some strength inside with Wilkins and Hargrave, but I would imagine that this probably puts Kinlaw closer to being whacked out / not having a space to get any snaps on the field. So now that thing's done. I think it still helps them to keep themselves moderately in there. Maybe long term, it's best for them in that respect, Brendan. But if we're looking at it through the lens of is it best for 2023, does it not make them, significant? Not saying, but pretty. It does make them worse.
Oh
It does.
yeah, of
Yeah,
course. But this is about the best you could do to recoup the situation.
it's true. I mean, I guess what is the better trade? Like I'm saying, Josh Allen. I probably should just be agreeing with you on this because I mentioned in Josh Allen. What's the other deal? I mean, what's the deal they're going to make as far as a return for a player? The assets are going to be the assets. 2 firsts and 2 seconds plus maybe a little bit, but that is it. There's nothing that goes beyond that. So I think it's a good point on your part with it. And yeah, you got to feel like they did what they could with it, but it still is to me a little bit of a more than being a gold star. You're giving them a bit of a red mark on it because of the fact that this is something with you guys not having the foresight of the situation to anticipate, and you could have anticipated it. You knew Bosa was going to want all the money. This was not a shocker that just suddenly he wants 35 million. No, you knew what was going to go on with him. You knew how this was going to play. But that fan base is going to freak the F out, Brendan. If they trade Bosa, they're not going to be happy with Wilkins. I will guarantee you that. That's not going to be like, oh, well, Wilkins is a good player. They will be losing it.
Oh yeah, especially because the assets you get, you won't even have them for another year. They're supposedly all in to win now. That's why I think they still should probably pay him at the end of the day, because this is not a situation where you have time. You don't have time for this.
Yeah.
You've already paid so many guys like Armstead, like Debo, like Trent Williams, soon Ayuk.
Yep.
Like you got to go now. That's why I feel like they got to suck it up and deal with it. But it's a weird one.
It's a strange situation, and it's tough signing that kind of check, but they've gotten themselves into it. And I agree with you. At the end of the day, you got to buck up and just sign the deal and lose Ayuk next year and try to just move on from it at that point, in my opinion. I think you can't. You just got to not get cute with it because you're in your mode right now. You're at the end of your Super Bowl window right now. Do you want to get the last year of that out of it, or do you want to close that window shut prematurely because you have some hesitance about signing a $140 million deal to a defensive player? It just doesn't track for me, Brendan. Right? Just doesn't quite track. Defensively on the line, we talked a little about Levi Bell, Tyreek Smith. Gotel played well for us. I'm hoping he gets back on the practice squad. Maybe a little bit of insurance, nose tackle support there from this Packers game, Brendan. BBK was cut today, even though he did okay in this game. Didn't do a lot of bright stuff. Who else to you on the defensive side of the ball in this game might have stood out as being a little bit of noteworthy or worthy discussion?
Let me think here. Matt Gotel, who's already been released, but Gotel had a pretty nice preseason. overall, I'd say.
He did. He was a good nose tackle in there. He looked pretty immovable, with the double teams when he would get him, and he could go in and track down and make a play, scrape down the line of scrimmage. I liked what I saw. Thought there was an outside chance he makes the roster, Brendan, if you weren't sure if Cameron Young was going to be ready to go here. But the team has released him out. I'd love to see him on the practice squad.
Well, each player gets 2 practice squad promotions a year, right? I think that's how it works. So you could sign him on the practice squad and then promote him for week 1 if you don't think Cam Young is going to be ready. So if he gets to the practice squad, don't be shocked if he's out there week 1. I think that's how it works.
That sounds probably about right to me too. So I could see it playing out that way. That would make some sense to me if it goes that route with it. He looks the part at least. And he did hold up over all 3 of those games. You can find a player or 2 in all of those games where he was flashing along. Not a whole lot else. Jacob Sykes had a player or 2 in there looking okay. But of course he was released along with the rest of the bunch on that. Kobe Bryant still doesn't look quite comfortable to me in safety, especially in coverage. Yeah. He seems to me a little bit, definitely unsure back there a bit and what he's seeing.
Yeah. The good news is we don't really need him at safety. There are 4 guys who would be ahead of him on the depth chart right now. So he was listed as a cornerback on our depth chart, I think, for good reason. Although, did you notice we actually carried an extra cornerback?
Well, that's why I think that he is your 5th safety on this roster as far as they're concerned. Because when you look at it, like you say, 4 safeties, but you got Jamal, who you don't know when you're getting back for sure. So you're going to rock games where you might have 3 safeties. Yeah. I don't think so. I think what they do is they know they've got Kobe, that they, in a pinch, this is why you build them up into that spot, is that you can kind of steal 1 extra roster spot by not having to hold that aside now. But smart of them to do so. I think the roster, and maybe this is a good time to turn this towards this, Brendan, a little bit. They did a good job, I think, on this roster of not overthinking this or going outside and letting something go that wouldn't have been smart. Trying to go to 3 running backs. There was a worry for a while there that DJ Dallas had done some death ensemble thing on his Twitter all of a sudden, removed his Seahawks mentions. There was like, is he getting cut? So I'm glad they didn't get cute like that with that. When you look at this roster cut down day, did it pretty much fit to form with you as well? Or was there some strange outliers to what you were seeing?
Kind of surprised we're only going with 6 defensive linemen, especially when 2 of them are injured. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's going to change in the coming days. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I actually kind of like that we went with the 9 offensive linemen. I thought we were going to do 10, but that gave us a little bit of extra room to keep a guy like Artie Burns, who has been playing really well, but I didn't think we were going to have room for him. So you do that. You also get to keep 6 receivers because you have Cody Thompson is still on the roster at the moment. Mm-hmm. That may not be long, but I'm pretty cool with most of it. I just don't feel great about having 4 healthy defensive linemen on the whole team right now.
We've had this one circled for a while, Brendan, and you and I have been sitting there going, okay, we walk into camp. Not sure about this defensive line. Jaron Reed, 0 tech. Cameron Young with some of the college tape that you worry about coming off the back of that. Brian Monet with the injury that he sustained that you weren't really sure when he's going to be ready. And now we get through camp and we don't see any of Cameron Young. Jaron Reed's in for about 8 snaps at the nose tackle position, and Brian Monet remains injured. I'm very still worried about this defensive line. Maybe it just comes down to this team looks at the way that they run their fronts, and it's not as important a thing as it is to the fans. And we're all still caught up in the 4-3 days of defensive linemen being so valuable in that way. But it remains a huge concern for me as well, and one that I just keep coming back to going, they're going to do something else. I mean, come on. We're not just running with it. There's something that's going to happen. Something is going to just we'll give it time. Something's happening. Okay. When are you guys going to do some every day is ticking closer and closer.
I'm not looking for much. If it's Jonathan Hankins, that's fine. If you want Jonathan Hankins in here for a few weeks to play 15 snaps a game, that's cool. Mm-hmm. I got no issue with that. Now, granted, that's problematic because he's a veteran and he would get his full salary for the whole year guaranteed. But the point is, I don't need to bring in Vince Wilfork here. I just need to go get somebody who can move his body in a way roughly resembling that of an NFL player.
Yeah, you're not looking pass rush. You just want a run stuffer. And that tends to be a skill set you can find somehow, some way in the open market if you're seeking it out. The problem is we just haven't seen the Hawks seek it out quite yet. They've not shown any indications of trying to trade for anybody or seem that impelled by the situation right now to do something. It'll be something to track and monitor, and maybe they're just good enough there. Maybe Brian Monet's just an inch away from coming back. And we know the team's been high on him, Brendan, having rewarded him with that contract a couple of seasons ago before he'd actually really done anything. But it's a little worrisome right now as it stands. Mentioning Artie Burns, he actually balled out of control in that Green Bay game. He was great. And
Yeah,
he was
he's
really
had
good
a couple good preseason games in a row. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a guy that deserves a lot more mention, and he makes a lot of sense as a fifth-end cornerback roster guy. You don't really care about this position much. You don't think, well, when's that guy even going to come in and have to play? But here's a guy that you can call upon now as a fifth corner on this roster if injury does beset that cornerback room, and you can go very deep into it, and you can feel very strongly that this guy can go out and be a functional starter for you for a couple of games if you have to call upon him to do that. Do you not?
I feel totally fine out there with Artie Burns. Obviously, he's not great, but there is a level of comfort there because he is a veteran. He's been doing this for a while. Wasn't he a first-round pick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
23 or something.
Yeah, there's some real stuff here. He's a real player. And if he has to play for us this year, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Like, it won't be amazing, but he's not going to let you down in any big, obvious way, I don't think.
No, and he's got familiarity in this scheme. Coming over, remember, he was the Bears with Desai, having had some familiarity in what you're trying to ask them to do in it too. So he knows very much of what he needs to do to be assignment correct. So Artie Burns, really one of your better players this preseason, and had his best game there against the Green Bay Packers. He was everywhere. I mean, and tackling like a demon out there. It was great to see. But nice to have him on the roster. Hopefully this nose tackle position, Brendan, that they can start to take a look at a little bit closer. I don't know what they're going to do. Like we talked about earlier, as we were kind of prefacing this a bit, you go through the defensive linemen that are on the open market, and there's like 2 or 3 guys that are sort of quasi maybes, but nobody that you feel good about that's anything more than just a jag. Nobody that supplies that thing you just talked about, Brendan, which is get in there, be mobile, be strong in the run. I don't even see that on the open market right now. So Snyder's going to have to get a little bit creative with this without there being a real clear solution to the problem at hand.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not going to need to be that much. Again, we don't need a super duper star here. I don't even need another player as good as a Al Woods. It doesn't even need to be like that. It just needs to be somebody who can play.
Mm-hmm. Just get us through this process until we can figure out what we got with Monet or what we got with Young, which we'll find out in a couple of weeks. And they got the trade deadline. You can go make a stronger move if you really need to do one at that point. But you sure would like to not have to go into week 1 with where it's sitting right now, because it does look a little bit looks a little strange. Brian Myers, thank you for the $10 donation. I do appreciate you, Brian, for that. He says, Hawks Nest and 12's family most likely won't see either of the first 2 games and miss the streams as I celebrate wife's milestone birthday outside the country. Take care and go Hawks. Well, Brian, thank you so much for the donation, man. Congratulations on your wife's birthday. Wish her a happy birthday from the Hawks Nest and Seahawks Brendan Nelson. And, we'll be here when you get back in game 3, man. So
yeah, we'll be here.
We'll be here
as long as they let me. I'll be here as long as they let me stay here.
That's right. As long
until they kick me out.
Shut off our channels. We'll be going, man. So you'll be back. It'll be 2-0 at that time. The nation will be starting to sign up to the Hawks bandwagon. They'll start to be believers now nationwide. But it's a good time to jump in at that point. The good times will just be starting to roll, I guess, as we get to that spot, Brian. But thank you, man. Go Hawks. Thank you for that $10 donation. And hopefully it's going to a cool country. Hopefully going somewhere where you get to have it's a fun outside the country. It's not one of those countries where you're like, lock the doors. Lock the doors. No eye contact as we're driving through. None.
Yeah.
Well, any other kind of thoughts from this roster cut down day that you saw that stood out to you, maybe even through the Hawks, or just kind of what you were seeing from on a national perspective with other teams around the league?
Really, no. I think we covered all the key stuff pretty well, and now we're just waiting for the season to get here.
Season's just about arrived, and that is indeed the case here. We find ourselves out here just a little over a week away from the start of the season going down with the Rams opening week at home. Nice little opening match to get at. Brandon, I just think just to put a capper on this as far as the preseason goes, this team gave you a couple of team-based wins, which was nice to see. You took Packers with their set first stringers on your second, their seconds on your third, and you took them right to the brink 19-15 on the road in Lambeau. This team seems to have a little bit of that re-energized spirit. I mean, this is where we get into woo-woo land, right? This is where I start bringing out the crystals and talking to you about, how's your energy been? Where's your pineal gland going right now? But they do have a little bit of that feel energy wise coming through this end of this preseason of like things are in the right direction. All boats are pointing the same way. We don't have clicks in this locker room. We've got a young, hungry team that seems like it's doing all the right things by what we're hearing from the coaching staff and whatnot. Are you getting the same feeling from this team going into this season?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, this is a fairly young team. This is one of the younger teams in the league. We're not as young as the Colts. I read a thing earlier today about how the Colts don't have a single player older than 30. They have 2 players who are exactly 30. Like, we're not that young.
And going for it. And they're going for it.
In theory.
In theory. By their owner's measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good luck with that. But yeah, this is a young team, and there should be some pretty high expectations this year. Not Super Bowl or bust type expectations, but there should be an anticipation of something pretty good this season. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think well-founded so. They will be very young, like you say, maybe not Colts young, but I think it's still going to be interesting to see where the average age of this roster equals out to, Brendan, because I think it's going to be down the low 25s, which will be one of the younger rosters in the NFL going into this season. But it is so talented, as talented as we've ever seen here in Seattle. Just can that talent tap into it quickly? Can it realize that great upside that it all sort of possesses? That'll be the part that we're just going to have to track and watch over the course of this upcoming year to see how it kind of all goes down. Just as we finish up here, Brendan, any trades or any kind of moves at all at the forefront of your mind that you've been kind of side-eyeing, like that girl in the club, like, oh, she's doing anything you're kind of looking at going, well, maybe this is maybe over here.
I was wondering, do we need to do a little bit better than Forsyth? But we decided to keep him. So I was thinking about maybe, is there a left tackle out there we could get? Because we saw it today. There were a ton of like very, very minor trades made. 7th round pick, 6th round pick, 6th round pick in 3 years, 5th round pick, 800 years down a lot of these tiny little trades. And I was thinking, is there a tiny little trade we can make for a better backup left tackle? But I couldn't really find anything. So no, not really. I couldn't find a heck of a lot.
Does Greg Little get you excited?
Greg Little.
Texans tackle.
I
mean, he's got a little bit
better than what we have.
I don't think it is. I think what we run into the tackle situation is the same thing in the defensive line situation, is that with the cuts that have happened and what we talked about with there not being a guy that's actually being cut for cap reasons, but still has something to him as a player, that's what you're getting guys that are kind of, but is he better? No, not really. Well, then what's the point? You got the cheap tackles right now, because let's remember, we do have them on a 6th round and undrafted rookie free agent contract respectively. That's mighty cheap. That is mighty cheap. I know you wouldn't like that to be maybe the main factor at the forefront of this, but maybe something to consider versus going with a veteran if they're not going to be a significant upgrade.
Yeah. And we don't like to give up on guys we drafted. Most teams don't.
No.
Like, Eskridge is still here. LJ Collier was still here until his contract expired. So
Rasheem Green.
There is something to be said for that. And I can't really think of any trade other than the ones we've already discussed. Like, if you want to bring in Christian Wilkins, I'll probably get behind that. Yeah. If you want to bring in Buckner or Grover Stewart, I'll get behind that. But those things have already been talked into the ground.
1st and 3rd for Wilkins, you're a yes.
1st and 3rd. Man, that's not far off from the Chris Jones trade.
No, it's not.
I really don't want to give up a 1st round pick in next year's draft is the thing. I'm trying to find either an opportunity to like steal a player like we kind of did with Clowney. We snuck in there, got 3rd round pick and a couple of fringe players.
I agree with you, but I think the problem with it is that he's so young, and this is the opposite of the running back situation, where instead of a market scarcity, you have a market dearth, which means that the price is the price at that point. And whereas, he'd be about the same price as Jones. He's a guy 5 years younger than Jones. Whereas Jones, you're getting the age accommodation into it. On top of the fact, Jones wants to be paid probably about $7.5 million on average more per year than Wilkins, if not even more than that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the more mid-level option here. I'm
I'm with
not
you.
trying to give up everything again because I have to ask if I'm going to make that big blockbuster trade, I want to feel like this team's going to the Super Bowl after it's done. And are with Christian Wilkins, are we better than the Eagles? I'm not convinced.
Probably not. Yeah, maybe not at that point. I guess it does get a little bit tighter with that one. But so you're a no then. First and third, you'd say at the end that's just too much. I got to do
Yeah,
it. A second and third, I'll do it, but not a first and a third.
yeah, I can't do it. At that point, I'm calling up Jim Irsay again and seeing if he's in a different mood than he was 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I guess that's what you try to double back. Go second, third, man. Here for Buckner. Let's go. Let's make this roll.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Or fourth for Grover Stewart or whatever.
Fourth quarter. I'll take either one, man. I'd be happy with either one and feel like we've improved the position. But I think it's a valid point on your part, and that it does it truly make you better and over the top. Well, you're not sure at that point. I probably find myself still saying yes, just because I'm starting to look at these options out there, Brendan. And it's just we're the last kid in the dance without a dance partner a bit when it comes to getting defensive line in the future. And I look at this team and go, everybody's been signed that's young and good throughout the league. There's not likely to be really a trade opened up. Yeah, we have a deeper class coming into next year as far as the defensive linemen are concerned, which is encouraging. But where's our pathway with that when we're going to be picking at the end of the draft? Where's our method to go get a guy with some really good talent at that point if they're all gone by the time we're picking? And that's where I come back around to saying, well, you got to sort of deal with what options are out there and available to you at that point. And if you have a chance to get them, you get them, but I can completely, from your standpoint, understand the other side of this is it's completely valid. Say, not another future first. Let's try to keep this in the back end, not back end, but day two, at least as far as the picks are concerned.
Yeah, again, it's circumstance. I just think we'd still lose to the Eagles. So why am I making this big blockbuster trade if I don't even feel good about us winning the conference? When we made
Yeah.
the Jamal Adams trade, at that time, I felt like we have a really good chance to go to the Super Bowl here because we were adding on to a team that had already made a decent run the previous year. Then I don't feel that way. It's just because the Eagles look so good, but yeah,
Eagles
I'm
look
gonna have
strong.
to stand by that one.
Eagles look strong, man. I can't deny it. And they did a great job in this draft, and they're going to get returns from that draft this year on top of it. So it's a valid thing to say because I think that they're going to still be tough again this year. As long as, of course, Jalen Hurts can remain upright, running the position like a running back at times, is that going to really work again for a second year? He got injured last year, and he said, I thought I broke my collarbone when he talked about the injury. So hopefully he can stay upright. Hopefully he can make it, make it roll in that respect of things. But it's going to be a fun year, Brendan. We're going to have a great time doing this upcoming year. Where we may be back Thursday, we might push the show to Saturday over on Brendan
Yeah,
Nelson.
not
Brendan
yet
Nelson.
to be determined.
TBD on that side of it. So we will let you guys know on an update on that. Keep an eye out for that. But me and Seahawks Brendan Nelson here, go over to his channel if you're not subbed. Seahawks Brendan Nelson here on YouTube. We're going to be doing 2 shows a year throughout the whole course of this year, along with, I'm sure, an emergency stream or two if John Schneider gets a little if he gets a little funky with it, if he decides to get a little funky with it, then we're going to definitely be doing a emergency stream here with you guys later on. But looking forward to this year, Brendan. I'm as excited for this upcoming season as I've been as a Hawk fan in a lot of years because it doesn't feel like we're stagnant. Doesn't feel like we're sort of spinning in circles. It feels like we're really moving on up that mountaintop. Maybe not get there this year, but we're at least going to get to one of the peaks. We'll get to at least the base camp, and the peak will be right there in eye shot for next season, if not.
I see it happening.
Well, folks, we will be back either in 2 days or in 4 days. One of the two will reschedule if we can't hit Thursday, but we will be back and be back soon. Until that time, I would hope that we don't have to remind you with a season like this looking so good with our Niners rival over there, just vomiting on them constantly. But even that being the case, we know sometimes we got to let you guys know because you can tend to forget, can't they? I mean, it can slide out of your mind. You got that Mariner baseball going on, so you can forget about the Hawks a little bit here with them killing it. Last question, by the way, I wanted to ask you this: Ohtani, blank check, yes or no?
I mean, I'm still game for it. We don't need Ohtani the pitcher. And he should be much more affordable now that he can't pitch or will be limited in his pitching ability going forward. So I'm still game. Like we've actually finally got that thing that I've been talking about for years.
Mm-hmm.
A lineup full of guys that don't make you want to turn the channel when they come up. Because you've added guys like Canzone and Rojas that have been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like not amazing, but they've been good. And you're also throwing in a guy like Cabby, who has found a way to be a serviceable at bat. you can from night to night now field a full lineup of credible hitters. But now you need another superstar because France has gotten to the point where I just want him out of here. I don't want Ty France anymore. Like, I'm completely done with that guy. And he's not the, in the box superstar that it looked like he was heading towards. He's gone the exact opposite way. So you need another superstar at this point, and this is one of the rare opportunities you're going to have to go add one.
You really do, and you don't have to give up anything for it other than the money. And people get caught up on the money a little bit when I was bringing it up on my baseball channel, Brendan. But I also come back to, the guy's going to bring in so much. How would you not say that you're going to sell out every single just about game when you have Ohtani and Julio that you're getting to put out on the field every day as far as the main attraction goes, especially with the heavy Japanese contingent we have in Seattle that would certainly go those games. So you'd make a lot of that money back up. I'm going blank check too. We're 100% on the same page with that one where, let's go, let's put it down and make it roll. Well, Brandon, thank you for doing this as ever, man. We'll be back in a couple of days here to start taking a look at, do we have the prediction show up next? Is that what
I think we're going to do a schedule prediction and then a more individual prediction kind of show.
There we go. So we got that up as the next 1-2 punch here on the channel. Again, get over to Seahawks, Brendan Nelson, sub up over there. If you're not already, sub up here too. If you're not already, come on, let's go. And please do not ever forget, not in this season, which maybe has a little bit of a magical pixie dust being just sort of sprinkled over the top of it. We shall see. It feels good right now. The vibes are going well. Everything feels right as we stand, and we got a week and a half away from maybe the beginning of a great upcoming season for your Mariners. So please don't you ever forget. Never forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.